Raktajino. After 6 months, I was hoping the Klingons would invade. At least they know how to make coffee. Even if they are foul-smelling barbarians.
Hey Star Trek fans, welcome to the July 2019 edition of the Raktajino Roundup. Lots of news to get to in this month's episode. Lots of movement in the world of Star Trek on television. And then after that, of course, we have book news and reviews and the birthdays coming up for the month of July. So without further ado, let's jump into the news. So as I said, there's a lot of news to break down this month. I think I'm going to do it by taking each of the upcoming Star Trek television shows and breaking down what we know about what's coming for them so far. So let's start with Star Trek Picard, which is currently filming in Los Angeles in contrast to Discovery, which films in Toronto, Canada. Season 1 of Picard will have 10 episodes, telling a story over the course of those 10 episodes as a season-long arc. The premiere episode was directed by Hanali Culpepper, making it the first Star Trek premiere to be directed by a woman. Another episode, at least, is directed by Jonathan Frakes. The series is expected to air at the end of 2019. That may be pushed to 2020, of course. There are sometimes delays, but as it stands right now, as far as I know, they're still on schedule to air in 2019. In the U.S., it will be airing on CBS All Access. In Canada, it will be on the Space Channel and Crave, and in the rest of the world on Amazon Prime. Shooting did begin in mid-April, and of course it is starring Sir Patrick Stewart as Jean-Luc Picard. Other stars of the show include Santiago Cabrera, Michelle Hurd, Alison Pill, Harry Treadaway, and Issa Briones, and I apologize if I mispronounce any of those. Michael Chabon, who's an acclaimed writer and novelist, is an executive producer of the show and was also recently named the showrunner for Picard. Now, initially it was reported that the show would be run by a team of people, but it seems that they've changed their mind on that and things will be proceeding forward with Chabon as head writer. The series is reportedly set 20 years approximately after Star Trek Nemesis, and 15 years after Picard led, quote, the greatest rescue armada in history, according to a recent teaser trailer. This is possibly referring to the destruction of Romulus in a supernova, and Alex Kurtzman, the head of Star Trek on television, has previously said that the destruction of Romulus will play a role in this series. Picard was formerly an admiral in Starfleet, but he has left that life behind for unknown reasons. Presumably later this month at the San Diego Comic-Con, we will learn a lot more about Star Trek Picard, but I'll talk a little bit about that in a few minutes. Moving on now to Star Trek Discovery Season 3, the prep for the season is well underway, and they've broken a number of episodes for the third season. It will be shooting in Toronto, and according to some recent reports, Season 3 may be doing some shooting in Iceland. Notably, actor Mary Wiseman, who plays Sylvia Tilly on Discovery, shared a pair of images from a recent trip to Iceland, and one of these images includes series lead Sonequa Martin-Green, along with Discovery executive producer Olatunde Osunsanmi in Reykjavik. So does this mean that at least some part of Season 3 will be filmed in Iceland? It certainly seems possible given the faces we see in this photo. It's not entirely unprecedented. Scenes for the premiere episode were shot in Jordan, with actors Sonequa Martin-Green and Michelle Yeoh filming the opening parts of that episode there. We will, of course, have more on the third season of Discovery as news becomes known. I'd imagine things on that front might be a little quiet as we gear up for Picard, but watch for more news when that series wraps soon. Next up, a brief touch on Star Trek Section 31, which is the spin-off of Star Trek Discovery run by showrunners Erica Leipold and Bo-Yeon Kim. Both of them are reportedly currently breaking the story, with plans to begin shooting the series as soon as Discovery Season 3 is wrapped. So once again, probably not be getting a lot of news on that in the short term, but look for a lot more as we get closer to the wrap of Season 3 of Discovery. Next up, we have the first of a couple of animated series. Star Trek Lower Decks. Mike McMahon of Rick and Morty is the showrunner. According to recent comments by Alex Kurtzman, what is typically the A story on another Trek show will be what happens in the background, with more of a focus on characters that are usually more peripheral to the command structure of a typical Star Trek show. According to Kurtzman, quote, "The spirit of each of these shows has to feel different. Mike's show is really for kids, I would say from 11 to 70. What I love so much about the way Mike is doing is planning things. What would typically be the ace story on any normal Star Trek episode is happening in the background. Like huge, crazy shit is going on in the background on Lower Decks, and that's super peripheral to the story that you're actually focusing on. No Star Trek show has ever really done that before." Look for more news on Lower Decks to come out of the San Diego Comic-Con as well. Really looking forward to learning more about that. Next up, we have the Untitled Animated Kids Show. Kevin and Dan Hageman are the showrunners for that, and it is being developed for Nickelodeon. From Alex Kurtzman, "The Hageman brothers are doing an animated show for Nickelodeon, and that will be entirely different from Lower Decks. I won't announce the name of the Nickelodeon show, but that's really a different show. That's a show that's for kids younger, full CG animation. It's going to be incredibly cinematic. We just started doing storyboards this week. It looks like wow. It's on par with Love, Death, and Robots in terms of beauty and lighting and cinema. So it's a really different feel, and Nickelodeon has been wildly supportive and I think very excited to bring a new energy to TV, in animation." He goes on, "Animation is in an incredible, glorious renaissance right now. Between Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, which just blew everything open and everything Pixar's been doing for so very long, I think what I'm excited about in the world of animation is to try all these different things to see what feels Trek." Again, not a lot of news on that front, but look for more to trickle out as we move forward. And finally, we do also have a bit of news on the Star Trek Short Treks front. According to Alex Kurtzman, there are 6 new Short Treks entries coming, 4 of which are live action and 2 animated. Of the live action ones, we know that there's a working title of Chaos Theory for one such episode, written by Michael Chabon and directed by Mark Pellington. This one allegedly features Rebecca Romijn and Ethan Peck as Number 1 and Spock respectively. This is thanks to Mark Pellington's Instagram account, where he took a few photos during the production of that episode. The 3 other live action episodes we don't know much about yet, but we may learn more at Comic-Con as well. And finally, we have some word from Alex Kurtzman on the 2 animated entries. Quote, "2 of them are animated, and they are unlike the 2 animated shows. What I love about the Short Treks is that they are an experimental training ground, a place to experiment with different things. Directors who we've never worked with before, tones we've never tried before." He goes on to say, "Michael Giacchino is doing one of the animated shorts. Olatunde Osunsanmi is doing another one in the animated shorts, and he's our main director on Discovery. And again, different animation styles, totally different tones. Aimed at kids, I would say, more than adults, those 2. What really strikes me about these quotes is the idea of Short Treks being kind of an experimental proving ground for new ideas for Star Trek. And I think that's where a lot of new talent can be discovered. For example, Michael Chabon, who isn't necessarily a new talent, but was new to Star Trek, wrote the Short Treks episode Calypso, and now is the showrunner of Star Trek Picard. So it was almost like his audition, it seemed. Definitely looking forward to seeing what they come out with for these Short Treks, and excited to see animated Star Trek for the first time in a long time as well. Now, as I mentioned earlier, of course, Star Trek is going to have a large presence at the San Diego Comic-Con, and it looks like they're planning some really interesting things for that event. So we have a number of different shows all at various stages of production and pre-production and that sort of thing. And it looks like they've created an umbrella term for all of this called the Star Trek universe. So at Comic-Con, Discovery Season 3, Star Trek Picard, and Lower Decks will all be represented under this umbrella term. So they will be having a big presentation in Hall H on Saturday, July 20th. So here are the details for that presentation. Enter the Star Trek Universe panel, 11:30 a.m. to 1 p.m. on July 20th in Hall H. In this panel, Star Trek Discovery Season 3, Star Trek Picard, and Star Trek Lower Decks will all be discussed. Scheduled to appear are Sonequa Martin Green and Tig Notaro from Star Trek Discovery, alongside executive producers Alex Kurtzman, Michelle Paradise, and Heather Caden. Seems weird that CBS would send the guy they fired to host the panels at Comic-Con. What do I know? For the Star Trek Lower Decks portion of the program, the co-creator and executive producer Mike McMahon will be appearing along with some surprise guests, and they will be sharing an exclusive first look at the upcoming animated series. I will definitely be checking Twitter all day that day. Unfortunately, I can't make it to Comic-Con, so I have to rely on the kindness of strangers and their Twitter savviness to get that news out as it happens. And finally, Star Trek Picard is also represented, and there will be cast members on the panel, including Sir Patrick Stewart himself, Alison Pill, Michelle Hurd, Evan Evagora, Isa Briones, Santiago Cabrera, and Harry Treadaway, alongside executive producers Alex Kurtzman, Michael Chabon, Akiva Goldsman, and Heather Caden. In addition to the presentation in Hall H, there will also be smaller Trek events in and around the Comic-Con, including a new gallery display, which they've done a few years in a row now. This year, the display is called Jean-Luc Picard: The First Duty. So this exhibition will showcase original props, costumes, and other artifacts tracing Picard's life and Starfleet career. These will include his Ressican flute, the Picard family photo album, his Starfleet uniforms, models of ships that Picard captained, and all that remains of the Borg Queen. This gallery will also feature exclusive first looks at costumes and other items in the upcoming CBS All Access series Star Trek Picard. And of course, because we live in a capitalist society, visitors will also have the first chance to purchase exclusive Star Trek Picard merchandise and opportunities for exclusive giveaways. The gallery will be open Thursday, Friday, and Saturday of Comic-Con from 11 a.m. until 9 p.m., and on Sunday from 11 a.m. until 5 p.m. There's also the Star Trek Universe booth, U.S.S. Discovery Transporter Experience, and Trek Talent Meet and Greets. Fans are invited to step aboard the U.S.S. Discovery and travel to strange and distant lands through an immersive transporter experience. Fans will also have the opportunity to meet some of their favorite Star Trek talent in person with meet and greets in the booth number 4237, on Saturday, July 20th. Comic-Con badges are required for entry. And we also have Star Trek Universe exclusive pins. A number of exclusive limited quantity Star Trek pins will be available to fans during Comic-Con. All week long, a Starfleet Headquarters Visitor's Badge will be available for those who visit and complete the Star Trek Transporter experience on the show floor. On Saturday afternoon and Sunday, a limited quantity of pins featuring the debut of two characters from the upcoming CBS All Access animated show Star Trek Lower Decks will also be available from the Star Trek booth. At the Jean-Luc Picard: The First Duty Museum experience at the Michael J. Wolfe Fine Arts, fans can get an exclusive replica pin of the Picard family crest, as seen in Star Trek Picard. So lots of Star Trek represented at the San Diego Comic-Con. I really do wish I could go. If you're going to be at Comic-Con, please get in touch with me and share whatever you learn. I will definitely give you credit. And now here's a quick rundown of the productions coming out through the month of July. On July 2nd, we have another little golden book, Too Many Tribbles. You can find a link to order that in the description below. July 5th sees the release of the third issue of Star Trek Year 5. This has been a really fun series. You should check it out if you haven't yet. July 9th features the release of Star Trek The Next Generation, the U.S.S. Enterprise NCC 1701D Illustrated Handbook. This one is put together by the folks over at Eagle Moss. On July 17th, we get the conclusion to the Star Trek The Q Conflict series from IDW, with issue number 6 of that series. On July 23rd, we get the release of the Star Trek Day-to-Day Calendar 2020 edition. And July 30th is the release date for Star Trek Discovery, The Enterprise War by John Jackson Miller, a novel chronicling what the Enterprise was up to during Discovery's first season Klingon War. For all of the books and the calendar that I mentioned in the productions coming up, you can find links to order those on Amazon in the description below.
Well, I have a little work to finish up. Then I'm going to my cabin. I'm going to put my feet up. I'm going to turn on my personal relaxation light. And I'm going to lose myself in the pages of some old novel.
This month on the bookshelf, I did a total of 6 reviews over the course of the month of July. Let's take a look. First up is Star Trek number 91, New Earth, Book 3 of 6, Rough Trails by L.A. Graf, which chronicles the attempt of the Belterre colony to establish a foothold in a very inhospitable environment. After that, I reviewed Star Trek Voyager, Spirit Walk, Book 2 of 2, Enemy of My Enemy by Christie Golden. This concludes the Spirit Walk duology by Golden, in which Chakotay takes command of the U.S.S. Voyager and sets out on a mission to rescue a lost Maquis colony. Next up is Star Trek Titan, Taking Wing by Michael A. Martin and Andy Mangels, the first book in the Star Trek Titan series, where the ship launches with her diverse crew on a mission to bring peace to the Romulan Empire. After that is The West Wing in Space, Star Trek Articles of the Federation by Keith R.A. DeCandido, a political novel spanning the first year of the new administration under President Nani Adabako, recently elected president of the United Federation of Planets. This very quickly became one of my favorite novels in all of Star Trek. Next up we have Star Trek number 92, New Earth, Book 4 of 6, The Flaming Arrow by Kathy Oltion and Jerry Oltion, in which the Enterprise defends the Belterre colony from an attack by the Called. And finally, what many consider to be the definitive Captain Christopher Pike novel, Star Trek Burning Dreams by Margaret Wander Bonanno, essentially a biography chronicling the life and times of Captain Christopher Pike. Also in the month of July, we did 4 episodes of the Literary Treks podcast. Here's a brief rundown. Literary Treks 270, Kirk is dabbing like a Warp 4 loony. This was Bruce and I's second episode for the Gold Key Archives Volume 5, in which we wrap up that volume with the final 3 Gold Key Comics issues. This episode is as crazy as the title makes it sound. Then we have Literary Treks 271, To Thine Own Self Be True, where Bruce and I discuss the new original series novel, The Captain's Oath by Christopher L. Bennett. Unfortunately, we could not get the author on for the episode, but there are included in this episode answers to written questions that we sent the author. Literary Treks 272 is called A Fun Borg Romp, in which Bruce and I discuss the Next Generation novel Resistance by J.M. Dillard, in which Picard confronts the Borg once again, and this time they're not out for assimilation, but for revenge. And finally, Literary Treks 273, Unintended Consequences. Titan, Orion's Hounds by Christopher L. Bennett is the topic of this podcast episode, in which the Starship Titan finally begins its mission of exploration into the Gum Nebula and encounters some familiar life forms that were first encountered by the Enterprise in the pilot TNG episode Encounter at Farpoint.
It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. Message, Spock?
None that I'm conscious of. Except, of course, happy birthday. Surely the best of times.
And finally, here are the birthdays coming up in July for the major players in the Star Trek franchise. On July 1st, Alan Ruck celebrated his 63rd birthday. He played Captain John Harriman of the Enterprise B in Star Trek Generations. July 1st is also the birthday of Dominic Keating, Lieutenant Malcolm Reed of Star Trek Enterprise. July 2nd was the birthday of Brock Peters, who played Admiral Cartwright in Star Trek 4 and 6, and Joseph Sisko, Captain Sisko's father in Star Trek Deep Space Nine. He passed away at the age of 78. July 3rd is Kurtwood Smith's birthday. You may remember him as Red Foreman on that 70s show, but to Star Trek fans, he played the Federation President in Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country, the Cardassian security officer Thrax in Deep Space Nine's Things Past, and the villain Anarax in the Voyager two-parter Year of Hell. July 4th is the birthday of Emily Coots, Kayla Detmer from Star Trek Discovery. She turns 30. July 5th is the birthday of Ronald D. Moore, noted writer and producer of Star Trek The Next Generation and Deep Space Nine. He turns 55. July 6th is the birthday of Rick Sternbach, illustrator and designer for many iterations of Star Trek. He turns 68. Happy birthday, Rick. July 7th is the birthday of Vaughn Armstrong, a very familiar face in Star Trek, having played many roles over many series, including Chorus, Dinar, Telek Ramor, Seskal, Lansor, a Vidian captain, a Hirogen, Korath, Admiral Forrest from Star Trek Enterprise, and also a Klingon captain and a Kreetassen captain in Enterprise as well. July 8th is the birthday of Shazad Latif, Ash Tyler from Star Trek Discovery. He turns 31. July 9th is the birthday of Linda Park, Ensign Hoshi Sato from Star Trek Enterprise. She turns 41. And July 13th is the birthday of Sir Patrick Stewart, Captain Jean-Luc Picard from Star Trek The Next Generation, and the upcoming Star Trek Picard. He turns 79. July 15th is the birthday of Hannah Hate, who played Molly O'Brien in Star Trek The Next Generation and Deep Space Nine. Believe it or not, she turns 31 that day. Hold up. Ash Tyler and Molly O'Brien are the same age? July 19th sees the birthday of Benedict Cumberbatch, John Harrison / Khan in Star Trek Into Darkness. July 22nd is the birthday of Louise Fletcher, Kai Wynn from Star Trek Deep Space Nine. July 23rd, Ronnie Cox celebrates his birthday. He played Captain Edward Jellicoe in the two-parter Chain of Command from Star Trek The Next Generation. July 26th is the birthday of Nana Visitor, Major / Colonel Kira in Star Trek Deep Space Nine. David Warner celebrates his birthday on July 29th. He played St. John Talbot in Star Trek V The Final Frontier, Chancellor Gorkon in Star Trek VI The Undiscovered Country, and Gulma Dread in Chain of Command Parts 1 and 2. July 29th is the birthday of Will Wheaton, Wesley Crusher from Star Trek TNG. Believe it or not, he turns the magic number of 47 this year. July 30th sees two birthdays. The first is Carol Struckian, Mr. Halm from Star Trek The Next Generation, who turns 71. On the other side of the age scale, Mary Wiseman from Star Trek Discovery. She plays Ensign Sylvia Tilly and turns 34 this year. As always, thank you all so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. And thanks especially, of course, to the Patreon supporters for their help in bringing these videos to you. I really couldn't do it without you guys. Keep an eye on this channel for news of upcoming Star Trek projects. And of course, when we get the Short Treks and Star Trek Picard series, I will be doing weekly reviews of those episodes. So keep an eye out for that. As soon as we know a release date, I will bring that to you. Thank you again all so much for watching. I'll see you in the next video. And until then, live long and prosper.